Welcome everyone to the launch of the Australian Benchmark Initiative for 2017. My name is Jamie McBrien. I'm a Director of Optum2, one of the sponsors of the Australian Benchmark Initiative, and I'm going to take you through today in this launch webinar a little bit of an overview and a little bit about the Australian Benchmark Initiative. I'm going to give you an overview. I'm going to take you through a bit of a recap of what we found out in 2016, talk through some of the roles, our role versus yours, the methodology and approach, the 2017 survey, and look, I'll take any questions. You can do them through the Q&A. It's a little bit hard. It's a one-way discussion here on the webinar. If you've got a burning question, feel free to type it in, or feel free to contact me directly afterwards to raise any questions with me. We'll try to get you out of here within the 30-minute time frame as promised to get you on with your days. In terms of an overview then of the Australian Benchmark Initiative, we think the leader in finance benchmarks and better practice here in Australia. Why did we start this? Entering its sixth year now, we found most finance benchmarks are US sourced. They may not be that relevant for Australia. Australia is ahead of the US in many aspects around invoice automation, around other pieces of automation, and a range of other factors in the way we do things that make those metrics not that relevant. We've seen some attempts at Australian benchmarks. They've been intermittent at best, I think, but with a lack of ongoing renewal. So there might have been a point in time for a single purpose, but not with no continuous focus. We also think that the opportunity to share better practice on finance operations amongst Australian companies is somewhat limited beyond the big conference organisers, and often it's fantastic to get groups of people together that own a process to discuss what's working for them, what's not working, and how to improve it. As a consultant in this space, it's often easier for me. I get to see lots of organisations, and more difficult for yourself seeing in an organisation to understand others and what they're doing out there. We think, entering our sixth year now of doing this, that we are the leading source of finance benchmarks and better practice in Australia, and I think that's a fairly fair assertion. So the objective is to build a set of finance benchmarks and facilitate the sharing of finance better practice between Australian companies. When we kicked it off in the first year, we would have been happy. We thought, we'll see how this goes, and we'll see where we get to. We were just hoping for around 20 participants, and we had around 34. So you can see that there's definitely out there a desire for organisations to understand more about this, as well as what is working for others. What's in it for you? Why are you here? Why would you be a part of it? It's free. Free is a good thing, hopefully. Only organisations that participate get a free copy of the report, though, including the benchmark metrics. So hopefully the incentive for you is to get involved such that you get the report. We'll also try to invite you to better practice communities. We've had a few sessions over the last couple of years. And if anyone out there wants to run a session in a certain area, feel free to contact me. We've also facilitated a few for different organisations when they've said it would be great to get 7 or 8 similar businesses together so we can work through X. Can you help make that happen? And a lot of the time we can. So if you're looking for specific areas, feel free to reach out to us directly. Anyone that's a participant can, and anyone else can as well. We'd also like to keep you informed of other events that happen through the year in terms of community practices and other areas under study. Again, that's one thing we'd like to get better at, is getting people together more to actually discuss some of these areas. Interestingly, the first year we ran this, we launched it via breakfast here in the Sydney CBD and in the Melbourne CBD. We had around 40 or 50 in Sydney and around 30 in Melbourne over breakfast. Over the next couple of years, as we ran it over those breakfasts, but also via webinar, one trend we've definitely seen is that no one seems to want to come to breakfast anymore, and everyone's pretty keen for the webinar. So that's definitely been a change. Less coffees to buy, but I think potentially an opportunity to reach out to more people. So hopefully a positive for all of you. In terms of the report, what do you get? Look, benchmark metrics are nice on their own, and everyone loves them, and everyone likes to point to them. But the report provides a detailed analysis on better practice, including what does good look like. It's one thing to say, well, I'm middle of the road. It's one thing to say, well, I'm not doing well. But the more important thing for us is, well, what are the people that are doing well have that I don't have? What are the attributes of their processes? What initiatives have they embraced? Is the critical part for me. However, we do provide the benchmarks. They're always important of poor, average, good for each of the quartiles, so you can see and understand where you sit in there. We think as well, though, that the problem with benchmarks is that they're always point in time. So we want to look forward and think about, well, what are people doing out there in terms of improvement strategies? What are the key trends? And also, how well are you performing against other leading Australian organisations? Having that forward-looking piece, and that's the interesting part for me, is to think about, well, what are people thinking about into the future for each of the areas under study? So what do the reports contain? As I said, metrics. We try to collect 6 or 7 detailed metrics for each process area. And that's one of the things we said right from the start. You can see benchmark metrics down to the lowest degree. I think they start to lose value. We think they start to lose value here at Optum too. We think that you pick out the key indicators, they give you a bit of an idea about where you sit. And inevitably, if you look at your process attributes, if you've got manual processes, you've got a lot of duplication, you're going to perform poorly. We think the important step is the next step, thinking about, well, what attributes do I need to improve? But the metrics are included. We do provide that better practice guidance of what does good look like, who does what, what are the high performers doing, and I think there's a learning in that for each of us. We provide detailed commentary around expectations and how things work and how we see it coming together. We also provide views on the future strategy and where people are going and where people are focusing. While a lot of the metrics we've found have changed year to year, we haven't seen a dramatic upswing or a dramatic downswing, but where we have seen a lot of change is where people are focusing their future energy. So we think that's a really interesting part of the report. So what questions should you expect to have answered if you participate in this study? What does good look like? How am I performing against my peers? And that's always a good one to be able to hand up to your bosses. What does a high-performing function look like? What's the optimal headcount for my team? What should the cost of my function be? And what are the key trends? All of those things should help you in building the plan for the processes that you look after, or the functions that sit under you that you look after, and building out that case for change. Using these metrics and these measures does provide, we think, a strong baseline for thinking, what are the improvements and what do I need to do to get there? And when I get there, what benefits should I expect to realise? So there's 3 separate reports: purchase to pay, receivables, and payroll are the 3 separate reports. We've got some details on how you can purchase the previous reports on our website if that's of interest, but of more interest to us would be getting you each to participate in this year's study. We also do report cards for each participant. We pick some of the key metrics, we take your results, we feed them back to you against the rest of the group, and give you some thoughts on where you're sitting and some potential ideas that you might need to focus in on. So I'd like to do a bit of a recap of 2016 of some of the results that we got. Firstly, just to take you through the participants in the survey. As I said up front, year 1, 2011, 34 participants. We said we'd be happy if we got 20. The take-up we were very pleased with in year 1. And then that kept kicking on from there. So we got 91 company participants last year, which we're over the moon about. The important part too is I think we've got a good quality, quantity, and breadth of respondents. If you have a look at the median results, you can see there that each study had a different number of respondents. Not everyone responds to every area of study. But you can see there the median revenue is around that 750 million. The median headcount's around 1,200, and around 40% are ASX listed. So we think that we've got this good quality and quantity of respondent that says it's representative of what is happening here in Australia. And I think that those numbers support that. I think that means that we get quality insights. I think that means the future strategies we put forward are reflective of what people are thinking. And I think that means that you can use it. You can use it with a fair bit of backing to say that this is where the world is heading. In terms of just some snapshots from last year, just to give you a bit of a teaser as to some of the things that were sitting out there. Some of these things seem pretty straightforward, but interesting how many people don't have them in place. But a snapshot on purchase to pay was Those that were performing high had standard processes and documented procedures. Fairly straight commentary, but amazing how many people don't have those things in place. They've centralized accounts payable. They've got purchase orders working well in advance. The three-way match is there. We're rejecting invoices to supplier, and we've got invoice automation. All really nice motherhood statements for things you need for P2P. But it pretty much is a one-to-one correlation. Those that don't have those things did not perform as well and are definitely not in the top quartile. Those in the top quartile pretty much have all of those things ticked off. In terms of the key future strategies, a lot of people are focusing on standardizing documenting procedures. A lot of people are thinking about invoice automation or workflow, getting some better operational reporting around performance metrics, and driving that purchase order penetration process. So the future strategies, as you'd expect, are focused on how the things that high performers do. In terms of some of the metrics here, the invoices per FTE or full-time equivalent. So this is the number of accounts payable staff at a full-time equivalent rate divided by the total number of invoices. Sitting there at that median level of around 11,400 invoices and up to 17,700 for high performers. Importantly, in the 70 or 80 or so respondents, though, the top quartile being approximately 20 organizations. If we take that top 20, there was at least 10 that were performing at 30, 40,000 invoices per FTE and above. So these were organizations that really had embraced automation, really had worked through a lot of the issues that others have. And so while that upper quartile, you might say to yourself, well, that's achievable. I think there's that stretch target beyond that some are achieving, and a high number of the respondents in our survey are achieving, I think, that are worth considering. Purchase order penetration, that's an area that's just been improving year on year. Again, that upper quartile is where you should be aiming, we think. We shouldn't be aiming for the median. If they had a 90, that puts you in the middle of the pack. We should be aiming for that top quartile, I think. In terms of payroll, again, I sound like a broken record. It sounds obvious, but these are the attributes that high performers had. Standardized processes, and that's standardized all the way from onboarding to time and attendance to EBA interpretation to reporting, the whole end-to-end process. Payroll typically reports into finance. I've had many a long argument as to the reporting lines of finance, but for some reason, it seems as though high performers sit within the finance organization. That's not a comment against HR functions. It's not a personal comment. That's just the facts of the results from the survey. Employee files are maintained electronically. Employee self-service is embraced. There's a standard employee time sheet, and we've got automated award interpretation in place. Some of the key future strategies that the payroll teams were focused on, we're getting SLAs right. So a little bit different to purchase to pay. This was in order of getting service levels right with the business such that they both understood their mutual obligations. Further centralization of payroll activities, getting time and attendance systems up, running and working, including award interpretation where possible, and considering the outsourcing opportunity. Payroll is definitely one of those areas that when we think about outsourcing, the opportunity can often be significant, particularly if it's associated with improved systems and other pieces as part of an end-to-end payroll offering. So that seemed to be a key future strategy for a number of organizations as well. In terms of the metrics, there's two metrics here. One is headcount per FTE. So this is the number of payroll officers divided by the number of full-time equivalent staff members. The second one is the payments per FTE, which takes into consideration the differing pay cycles that certain organizations have, be it weekly, fortnightly, monthly, or what have you, to give you some results there again in terms of how many payroll officers we need per headcount, so you can, or per transaction. So you can see there an organization of 513 in the top quartile is operating with 2 payroll officers. Of course, one of the hard things in this sort of space is that you probably need to, if you're at 500, just so you have some backup. So that does make things more difficult. But you can see that there is organizations that are operating at that sort of level. Receivables. So high performers, centralized accounts receivable, standardizing and communicated policies and processes back out to the business, a rigorous credit assessment process. It always amazes me, organisations that don't have that, electronic credit records and invoicing, and a coordinated collections approach that includes letters, calls, and external agencies. That's largely automated, but also has special triggers in there to make sure there's monitoring, reporting, and management review and escalation, and getting that right. Again, it's an area that kind of shocks me when we do our work, that we often find the collections process is often, well, who do we think we need to focus on this week based on a spreadsheet? And I say that a little bit mockingly, but it's amazing how many large organizations I deal with, and we deal with, that have that sort of approach to collections. And that is absolutely reflected one-to-one in things such as day sales outstanding, and those other sort of measures. Those, again, that have these processes in place, that have thought them through properly, have considered them in relation to the different types of customers groups that they have, and build those tiered collection cycles, are the ones that are inevitably performing higher. So the key future strategies, everyone's focused on reducing DSO. One of the things that we often do with clients is, if you can, and you can do this yourselves, it's pretty straightforward, is you can go out and measure the cost of debtors, you can go out and measure the cost of payables, you can go out and measure the cost of all these areas, and to think about, what does 1 day reduction in each of these change? It's one of the few areas where, well, there's a number of areas, but it's a core area where us as finance professionals, be it, I'll go through payroll into the finance bucket for now, payroll, payables, and receivables, can sit there and say, well, we can identify our cost to the organisation. We can also identify the benefit to the organisation of changing some of these levers and metrics. One client we worked with, a very large organisation, we worked out that their cost of DSO per day was around $200,000 impact to the bottom line. So pulling it in has a real impact that we can show back to the organisation. Standardising document processes and procedures was the second most important thing in this area. Look, I was making a bit of fun up front, but really it's I know it's a hard task getting standardised processes and getting everything documented and then maintaining it. A lot of the time clients come and they give us what they've got, and you realise that the last time it was updated was 5 years ago. But improve receivables reporting so they can get better focus in on key high risk and important debtors in working through some of those initiatives. Some of the snapshots here, the DSO has been reducing year on year. It was 41 last year. Our friends over at Dun & Bradstreet have a similar measure. So again, that's why we're feeling pretty confident with our numbers that we're landing in about the same spot as them, and that's all they do for a living. So we think that's pretty good. The percentage of electronic payments has been increasing year on year. We still hear a lot of the same reasons as to why you can't receive electronic payments in certain instances. Most of the time we think that those things are just a matter of history and people not willing to embrace where the world's going. But I see no reason why people should not be well up towards that upper quartile. It would be unique to find a business that really had a good reason to be sitting in that lower quartile. I don't think there is. And if you do have one, feel free to contact me, and I'd like to discuss and understand why that might be the case. So that just gives you a bit of a snapshot from last year. I hope that gives you a bit of a flavour. We've only got 30 minutes here today. We can give an hour presentation and often do on each subject area. So they've had about 3 or 4 minutes each, which might be a bit of a disservice, but the intent is to give you a flavour for what it is that you'll get to understand and learn, and some of the things that we hope you can apply back to your business. So in terms of the roles that are part of the Australian Benchmark Initiative, 3 organisations involved. The first two, Optum2. Optum2 is a consultant company focused on assessing and improving finance operations in Australian businesses. All of our work's around improving finance process and helping drive that transformational change in each of these core areas. Opti BPO is our sister company. We help build dedicated teams, offshore teams in the Philippines. Not necessarily related, but outsourcing is a growing opportunity for a number of organisations. And for those that it is of interest, that's what Opti BPO does, and helping set up these teams that typically operate at around a 70% cost reduction to an Australian team. The third area is the third sponsor is the Association for Payroll Specialists. It's the original association for the payroll industry here in Australia, and we thank TAPS for their fantastic support of us and this initiative, and the number of payroll professionals that they've got involved in our study from last year. And I see a growing number, and today there seems to be a lot of you on the conference call. So I'm pretty confident that the payroll might be the biggest study area this year, but we'll see. Purchase to pay has historically been the biggest, but I'd be happy for payroll to step up and be our biggest area with the largest number of participants. So in terms of the way the study works, there is a code of conduct. Importantly, that we will maintain data in a secure and confidential manner. In terms of the data that you give us, we promise only to publish it at the aggregate level. We will not show you against other organisations, except in your report card, which only goes to you, no one else, which is you against the aggregate. It's not you against specific other businesses. The name of the respondents may be used, but we won't use any information relating to you. We will not use any data for marketing purposes. I think this is an important part. We're a consulting company. Importantly, we'd love to talk to you about your business problems and how we can help you. I think, though, by the same token, you do not want us calling you saying you answered such and such on your research. We would like to talk to you about how we can help you. We have never marketed to anyone based on what they've said in the survey. We've never used the survey data as a marketing tool, and will continue to operate in that manner. We would like to keep in touch with you, though, in relation to future events. And if you do have a specific issue that you'd like to discuss, I'd welcome you to reach out to us directly. But we won't do it the other way around. I think the important part from your side is, and there's more information on this code of conduct on the website, is that you can provide complete and accurate data to the best of your knowledge. We want to get the most robust data such that we can get to the best outcomes and the best insights, and hopefully you can support the deadlines of the study. In terms of the methodology for the benchmark initiative, there's some key considerations. We want to make it online. We want to make it easy for you, but if you don't want to do it online, and I think we only had one or two last year that chose this, whereas a few years ago there was more. You can download the PDF, mark it up yourself, scan it and send it back to us. But look, online surveys, I think most of us now are fairly used to them. But if there is an issue, let us know. We also want to make sure that it's not onerous on the participant. We think that if you understand your existing processes, you've got your measures and metrics at hand, you should be able to work through this in 20 to 30 minutes, which we think is not onerous. If you don't have those things in hand, well, look, you probably should anyway, because it's your process and it's a good thing for you to go out and collect. It might take you a little bit longer, but again, hopefully that is a learning for you. We want to make sure the questions are straightforward and relevant across the organisation types. One of the great things being how many years we've done this for was that year one, there was a few questions that people thought were unclear. We've improved on them. And through the years, we now think that we've got to the point that while we've added questions, made new questions, changed questions, we think we've got a pretty good baseline in terms of straightforward, relevant questions. And we've removed questions that we think just don't quite work. We can provide direct support as required. Feel free to call us if you get stuck, you don't know the answer, or if you think it's not relevant to you. As I said up front, we also want to keep the metrics simple but meaningful. We think there's no point having ad nauseum metrics that don't provide any value. So the way we go about it is that we collect the data. We'll validate it all for reasonableness. We always get responses that you look at them and you go, well, that's clearly not right, or there's clearly a question to be asked. And where needed, we'll come back to you and ask questions. We'll use our subject matter expertise. This is all we consult on a daily basis, is these core finance processes and the finance organisation as a whole. I've personally been doing it for over 20 years, and everyone within this organisation has been doing it for at least 15 years. So we've got a fairly high level of experience as well as grey hair in terms of making sure that we can use your data and information to get some real and actionable insights. We hope as well to provide some high quality reporting that you can use and keep. that you can make reference to, you can build business cases around, and that you can use to help your justification for change within your own organisations. The survey tool we use is SurveyMonkey. Look, I explained this the last couple of years. This is a standard slide, but I don't think I really need to explain Standard Monkey anymore. I think you've all would have used it at some stage. Just an online survey tool. As I said, we've made sure that we've reviewed these questions and we've built them up, we think, to a point where we've got a fairly solid base of questions. In terms of the 2017 survey then that we're about to kick off, the survey size. So for each of the 3 areas under study, there's around 40 questions for P2P, 29 for payroll, and 32 for receivables. So even though they're questions, a lot of them are multiple choice, asking you to provide different information. There's 7 metrics for P2P, 6 for payroll, and 6 for receivables. So as I said, you should be able to move through the questions pretty quickly. While we try to keep them simple, we want enough information that we can really come up with some of that commentary around what people are doing good and where they see the future going. In terms of answering the survey, data should be sourced for the past 12 months. If you don't have specific information available, but you can get to a reasonable estimate, that is okay. If you cannot get the data, I prefer not to answer. Don't think, well, I don't know the answer to this question, or I don't have that data point, I can't participate. Just leave it blank. We'll remove it out of the pool for that one question, and we'll keep working on the rest. We understand that some people might not be able to answer every single question. You can stop, save, and restart the survey, so you can get into it and come back. But you should be able to do it in 20 to 30 minutes. But we think you should collect the metrics prior, just such that you're good to go. And we'll list the metrics for you in a email circular that will come out within the next week. Any questions that you've got, send them to info@australianbenchmarks.com or phone that number below, which is the benchmarking hotline that we will look to respond to and make sure we can support you in getting to a good outcome. In terms of the structure of the surveys, each of them is the same. We want to understand some general company information. We want to understand a bit about your management operating environment. There's some process maturity around your process attributes, where you see the future going, and of course the what you're all here for, which is the benchmark metrics. Some of the things we ask around the general organisation are there, and we ask you to tick that you've understood the code of conduct. The management operating environment is we want to understand about policy definition, what's the quality, do we have a shared service, do we have standard operating procedures and processes, and how well do we report upon ourselves. So fairly standard stuff, but some areas that many organisations do have improvements in. I'm going to step through these quickly, but each of the process areas, we look through the end-to-end process. So from purchase to pay, the supplier master file, purchase orders, other methods of purchasing, and how do we pay. These are some of the future strategy questions that we asked around the purchase to pay space, which I'll jump over quickly. You can have a look at them yourself in the surveys when they are released. And these are some of the key metrics around purchase to pay. Again, I'm going to be very quick here, but this information will be shared with you. You can review it at your leisure and go from there. Payroll, again, end-to-end from setup to getting the file, time and attendance, and processing the payroll. Again, we go through the future strategies and some of the key metrics, being really quick here just in the time that we have. Receivables, again, from setting it from credit risk assessment, setting up the new customer, managing the credit, and then the collections process and how that worked for you. Again, future strategies and metrics. The timelines for the study are that we're launching it today on the 27th of September. I'll talk about getting the actual surveys out to you within the week. Registration closes on the 10th of November. Study closes on 1 December. I know we'd like to give people time to do this, but I'd encourage you all to get out there and get it done as soon as possible. There's one organisation, I think they're on the line right now, and I think they've, for the last 3 years, been the first company to submit their results every year. So I'll be monitoring to see if they are there again, and they might need to get a special mention and a bottle of wine if they are the first organisation again to lodge their results. The study closes the beginning of December. That gives us some time to chase up stragglers. and people that we know, it's typically the people that know us the best that seem to take the longest. I think they must think that we're friendly to them. And so they seem to be the laggards in getting us the information. But look, if you can try to get the information to us, that's really helpful. We'll produce the report over the Christmas period. Well, look, we probably won't be doing it over that 2 weeks of Christmas, but over that period, to come back in February, mid-February or so, to come back and present the report to you on how you've done. If you haven't registered, look, I think everyone that's on this line has either put their hand up as interested. If you've only put your hand up for the webinar and you haven't registered for the study, get on the website, register for it. There's a few of you that have multiple organisations, multiple people that have registered. That's great. If you've got we'll contact each of you. For multiple divisional businesses with decentralized processing, if it's an organisation that rolls up into a shared service, well, that should just be one survey. If it's really just two distinct businesses with two separate processes that bear no correlation, consider doing a separate survey for each part. I think we only had 2 examples of that last year. The surveys, the code of conduct, and the metric sheet, we'll be sending that out by next Friday, the 6th of October. There's some finishing touches that have been done on that, and registrations seem to be flowing through. People are getting excited. We had around 20 or so registrations just yesterday. Seem to be getting excited with the idea of getting them distributed by next Friday, the 6th of October. If you haven't registered and you're on this link and someone sent it to you, please jump onto our website at australianbenchmarks.com and hit the registration link. That brings us to the end, and I'm pretty pleased with myself in terms of the benchmark given of finishing on time. I'm just going to have a look if there's any questions so far, and pleased to say, or not pleased to say, happy to take questions, but I can't see any questions in the Q&A box. So I'm going to thank you all for your time and for being part of this today. If there's anything that is unclear, feel free to reach out to us directly. Happy to talk you through it. Or if there's any problems or questions that you have in advance or things that you're working through in your organisation that you'd like input on, always more than happy to come out and have a coffee or have a conversation with you, and we can go from there. So thank you and good day, and we look forward to your participation.